Good afternoon, everyone. It is Thursday, May the 28th, 2020. It is currently 1:22 p.m. Central Time. I have been sitting here for 15 minutes, staring at this microphone, thinking about hitting the go live button and having this sense of nervousness, this sense of inadequacy that I don't have the ability to discuss what I need to discuss. I don't have the ability to share what I need to share. And this very sad understanding that no matter what I'm about to say, someone is going to get upset with me, and I'm going to be accused of all kinds of things. I may be accused of being quote unquote woke, which I guess you don't want to be that. Or I'm going to be accused of being liberal, or I'm going to be accused of being blind, or who knows what I'm going to be accused of. But no matter what I say, I know that I'm not going to come out of this, no matter what I say, it's not going to benefit me, right? No, I'm not going to benefit from talking about what I need to talk about. But I feel that I have no choice but to talk about it because I feel I need to share something. Now, I don't know. I know this. I believe that I'm going to share a perspective and some thoughts that is much needed because of the way this subject is typically dealt with. Now, what I ask of you is that you listen to me carefully. Now, if you are busy, this may not be the podcast to listen to while you're busy. You may really want to sit down. You may want to put on some headphones. You may want to go somewhere quiet. And I pray that you will that you will demonstrate a little bit of patience. And let me try to take this apart, put it back together, and that you will not judge me. You will not judge me until I have stated my last word. When I have ended the broadcast, then feel free to judge me. But during, at least let me finish. Please hear me out. And I hope I can try to do justice to this very controversial subject and something that really not just I hate even to even use the word controversial because I don't really know what's controversial other than I think we should be saddened and angered. I don't know why there's controversy, but there's controversy with everything. And just if someone new is listening to me, my approach here is to look at this in a very fair, balanced, and a theological perspective because I believe, and I've stated this over and over and over again. I mean, the name of the podcast is Theology Central, so I'm going to try to make theology central to what I'm discussing. I understand that there are lots of things that happen in the world, and then everyone yells and screams, and everyone wants to speak about the subject either from a political perspective or from some other ideological perspective. And I believe ultimately, all the other perspectives, all political, ideological, you can argue and argue and argue, but all you do is argue because you don't have any real solution. And in many cases, you don't even have any real reason to argue against something or to try to argue that something is morally wrong or something is inherently wrong because you don't even really have a basis for morality. So I am going to try to look at this from a theological perspective, and hopefully I can do that and make this very clear. Some of my harshest words will be reserved for many within the church, and what I have witnessed and seen in their discussions about this subject has disgusted me, has made me very angry. And at times, once again, I feel like that there is no place for me within the world of Christianity. Sometimes I really don't feel like there's a place for me within Christianity because I believe in many cases Christianity has turned into something that the Bible would not even recognize. And that's sad. That is sad. And that's, I've been talking about that issue, but all of this is going to come together. So I'm just trying to take a second to talk, to try to let my emotions calm down, because I'm nervous. My heart is beating about 100. I don't even know what my heartbeat rate is right now. It's probably about 200, 300. I'm probably going to pass out. I am extremely nervous. And I just hope that you have some patience with me. All right. There's a lot of things we need to discuss. Okay. And I want you to just hear me out, and we'll see if we can make it through this together. All right. I hope I have your agreement to that. Headline after headline. News story after news story. And it's the same story. It's the same headline. Headline after headline, news story after news story, and it's basically the same headline. It's the same news story. A Black American dead. Another Black American has died at the hands of someone, or at the hands of the police, or in some horrible situation, and it's typically captured on video for the world to see. Now, I am very aware that people of all races die. Very aware of that. And I understand that people die of all races in ways that are not just, and they're not right, and they're not legal. I'm very aware of that. But I want you to listen to me carefully. If you're going to get into some argument about statistics and want to start arguing with me about statistics, then you're arguing with the wrong person, and you're missing the entire point. All right, let's deal with two very prominent stories that you're very aware of. Let me read from the USA Today. George Floyd adds to trauma. African Americans face harmful mental health effects every time high-profile incidents of racism and police brutality go viral, especially when little changes in the aftermath. George Floyd, after a police officer knelt on his neck, Ahmaud Arbery while on a jog in Georgia, Breonna Taylor while police raided her Louisville, Kentucky home, and the ones before, Eric Garner, who couldn't breathe, Castile in the car with his girlfriend and her 4-year-old daughter, Trayvon Martin, only a boy. Scores of killings answered with acquittals. Now, as a pandemic rages, African Americans and communities across the country disproportionately devastated by COVID-19 are forced to bear witness to more Black deaths. I just want you to hear names again. George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor. All right, just names. Now, maybe you've heard of, I know you've heard of George Floyd. I know you've heard of that because it's all over the news. I know you probably saw the video of George Floyd. You probably saw the video of Ahmaud Arbery, and you probably heard the story of Breonna Taylor. High profile cases. People talking about them all over social media. People begin to talk, and people begin to debate, and people begin to argue. And I want you to understand that when people start debating and start arguing, it always bothers me, because the first thing we have to consider is these are human beings who died. And we have to stop and at least first grieve for the fact that they died, and then you can begin to discuss certain issues. But how many times does it have to happen? Another news story, another Black American dead. Another Black American dead. Here's the video. Another Black American dead. Here's the video. And as soon as the videos are released, then people will start arguing and they start trying to counter it and go, well, Ahmaud Arbery, he was supposedly out for a jog, but he was over there looking at, a house that was under construction, and I bet he was going to do this and this, and start trying to make some kind of excuse, start trying to make some kind of explanation. These are individuals that died. All right. Now I'm going to walk through this very slowly and very, very systematically and very carefully. All right. Let me begin with this. I am white. I grew up in a small town in Texas. I had friends who were black. They moved from New York City. They wanted to get out of New York City. They wanted to get out of all of the chaos in New York City. So the father of the family, I think it was two families, they got together one evening. The fathers put a big map on the table. They basically closed their eyes, pointed down, and they're like, Buffalo Gap, Texas. Population like 320 people. They sold everything they had, loaded into a station wagon, and moved to Buffalo Gap, Texas. They were the first African Americans to walk into the hallways of the school that I went to. All right. They were from New York. You talk about culture shock. You talk about craziness. So I met them and I heard some of their stories. I heard some of their stories about being black and what it was like. But I couldn't really relate. I couldn't really understand. They shared parts of their culture with me. I shared part of my culture with them. We got along. We played football. We hung out. We watched movies. We listened to music. And it was fine. Now, my experience with racism is somewhat limited. Right? And I want you to hear, because this is very important, because so many times when white people begin to talk about these kinds of cases, we have to at least understand that our perspective is not adequate in many cases. So I want you to hear my background so that you understand why I stated at the beginning that I feel inadequate. So just stay with me. All right. Buffalo Gap, Texas, like population 300 something people. All right. So two African-American families move in. I become I become friends with them, hang out with them, go to their house. They come over and I get a little bit of their experience and I get to understand a little bit. But I was more than happy to be their friends. And here's the reason why. I'll have to go even further back, right? I was very, very young. I do not remember where I heard the word, but I heard the N word. I don't know if I heard it in a movie. I don't know if I saw it in a book. It may have been I saw it in a book. Maybe the adventure, Tom Sawyer or the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. It may have been one of them because I read those books very, very, very young. I knew how to read before kindergarten. I was reading, well advanced books at a very early age. So I may have been a book, but I remember walking through the door and asking my mom what the N word was. And I said it. And my mom backhanded me, knocked me halfway across the house. Okay. I mean, hit me hard and told me that I was to never, under any circumstance, utter that word because that word was wrong, right? I mean, it was a moral issue with her, that it was immoral, that it was wrong. She didn't state it from a biblical perspective, but just told me it was wrong. And I didn't understand. And she got me the book Roots, all right? The TV series made after. And it was a very thick book, and she told me to read it. And when I started reading the book, I was, and I don't know when she got me the book versus when I got slapped. It may have been longer. I don't know. I tried to put the timeline together. It's a little cloudy because, I was young, and of course all my parents are dead. So I can't, verify timeline. So some of the time frame may not completely work together perfectly, but this is the way I remember it. I remember asking that word, and next thing you know, I'm reading Roots, okay? And I remember reading this book about slavery and all of these horrible things and human beings being purchased and sold and treated as property and horrible things happening. And I could not believe it. I was just blown away. I was totally disturbed by it. And then she gave me a book on the Holocaust. And I heard about Hitler trying to exterminate the Jews and blaming everything on the Jews and learning about people hating the Jews. And I'm like, man, this racism and hating people because of a different race or a different color of skin or different backgrounds, I didn't understand it. And so in some ways, I couldn't understand it because I'd never experienced, because I'm white living in a predominantly white area. So I'd never experienced racism, but I likened it. And I'm not saying, again, my perspective is not completely accurate, but I just want you to try to understand my mind processing it. Okay. So I likened it that I grew up here in small town, backwoods, Texas, in the middle of nowhere. And I did not get along with anyone because I did not fit in, and I was bullied and all kinds of things happened. I'm not going to go through all that, but I likened it to, why did they hate me just because I'm different? So that's a lot like these people hating someone of a different color just because they're different. I just saw it as anytime someone is confronted with something that's different than them, they attack it. But I still didn't quite understand racism in any major way. At some point in my childhood, there was an African-American woman who basically watched me. She was I was very young. And I remember going to her house all the time. And again, it was like, to me, it didn't even register in my mind, oh, she's a different color. It didn't really register in my mind. I guess the first time I really experienced, hey, I'm white and none of these people are, and I kind of felt that like I'm out of place, I was young. And maybe fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade. I don't know. I was very young. Not even sixth grade. I don't even know what grade. And I won the Southside one-on-one basketball tournament for Abilene, Texas. The South Side of Abilene. This is the South Side. Okay. South Side was where I lived. Again, predominantly, all white people. Pretty much everyone at the rec center was white. It was at one of the recreational centers where all the kids hung out during the summer. There was a one-on-one tournament. I beat everyone who had signed up for the tournament on the south side of Abilene. I don't remember how many total people. I won. I get a little trophy. Yay. Okay, I'm the best one-on-one basketball player in south side of Abilene. Then one of the people who worked at the rec center said, "Hey, now you know what that means." I'm like, "No." And they're like, "Now you get to go to the north side, and they're gonna bring some of the best people from the north side, and you're gonna compete against some of the best people on the north side." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, that'll be cool." I didn't even register or think about race; didn't even enter my mind. So I had to go to the rec center on the north side of town. Now, the person who took me, who worked at the rec center on the south side, was African American. It didn't mean anything to me. All right, so what? He takes me over there. I walk in, and this is the first time I ever felt it. Wow, I'm the only white kid here. I was it. Everyone in the stands were all African American. Every kid that I was going to compete against was African American. I was the lone white. Even the person who brought me was African American. I was it. I was the only white kid there. And I felt it. But I wasn't really nervous because, again, my mom brought me up very strongly that race is irrelevant. Race is indifferent. There are good people who are African American. There are bad people African American. There are good people who are white, and there are bad people who are white. Again, not a very theologically sound per se explanation, but my mom wanted me to realize that don't worry about the color of the skin. The color of the skin is irrelevant. The color of the skin is irrelevant. Color of the skin is irrelevant. And we were not. Again, if we even uttered anything that even came within a million miles of racist, my mom would have beaten the living daylights out of us. It was not tolerated. And I am so grateful that I was I'm not grateful for some of the things that happened in my home, but I'm grateful that I was brought up with this way of thinking that racism is just not to be tolerated. So I started playing in that tournament, and I immediately realized I'm not that good. Okay, I thought I was good, but now I'm playing kids who are better. They were taller than me. I was a short little white kid. They were much taller than me, and clearly they played far more basketball than I did. For me, basketball was barely even a hobby. Clearly, these kids played it all the time, and they were kicking my butt. But something weird happened. The African Americans in the crowd, they actually started cheering for me, the little white kid. They were very respectful. They were very nice. I'll never forget it. It was like, wow. I mean, I'm getting my butt kicked. I'm the outsider, but they treated me as if I was one of them. And it was like, that's so cool. Like that is so awesome. So I had a great experience there. Like, once again, I'm the outsider. But they were cheering for me, and I was like, wow. And they would be like, great job. And when I got destroyed and I got eliminated in the tournament relatively quick. But these strangers were walking up to me saying, hey, good job. Thanks for coming. I'm like, thanks for coming. Like what do you mean? Thanks for coming? I mean, it's a tournament, and it was bizarre. So that kind of gave me I've had white people who treat me far worse than that. So I didn't think about, I don't even know if I really, I saw it as them showing kindness to a stranger, not really so much. I didn't really draw the correlation between race. So that was the first. The next big experience I had is I spent a good portion of my older teenage years into my 20s at the club. I loved to dance and I loved music. Love to dance, love to go to the club. All right. Now, Friday, Saturday nights. Now I didn't do well on whenever they had quote unquote teen night at the club. I always ended up in a fight. Because I would be out there dancing. I got the attention of the girls, and the teenage boys saw me as a target. Almost always ended in a fight. It was horrible. Not with African Americans. It was typically with white boys who felt I was, their girlfriend was looking at me and wanting to dance with me, and it always turned bad. So I got out of the teen club thing as fast as I could, because I could tell you one of the stories that happened in the teen club that was bad. I mean, you talk about full blown, it was almost a mini riot. Knives got pulled, bar stool got cracked over people's head. Cops had to be called. It was not good. And again, that was all white people. So again, my perspective always was white people were far worse. I had more problems with white people than I ever did with African Americans. The reason why is, I grew up in a predominantly white area. But I never try to see race. I'm just trying to explain some of my experiences, because I want you to understand this, and you'll see why in a minute. The next big time where I really encountered quote unquote race, the next time I really encountered it, is I went to the club Friday, Saturday. That was predominantly white people. There were some African Americans. There was predominantly white for the most part. Again, predominantly white part of the country in the middle of Texas. And there were some. There were those who were Spanish. There were some African Americans. Never had any issues. For the most part, on normal club night, I didn't have any issues. I got a lot of attention from females. For the most part, the guys didn't feel too threatened like the teenage boys did, and everything went great. But I wanted to go to the club far more than just Friday and Saturday. I wanted to go, every time the door was open, because I love to dance and I love music. Well, I think it was Thursday nights. It may have been Thursday nights. It may have been Tuesday nights. I don't know if it was Tuesday or Thursday nights. I don't remember which night it was. But for many in this part of the country, they referred to that as Black Night, right? That's the nights they play far more R&B and hip-hop focused music. And that's when all the African Americans go, or all the blacks would go. And basically you were kind of told you're not welcomed if you're white. And I'm like, that makes no sense to me. That makes absolutely no sense to me. Why am I not welcomed? My skin color, what difference does it make about my skin color? I'm not, and I was arrogant. I'm like, and I could probably outdance all of them there. So what difference does it make? Well, I went. Now, when I first walked in, it was really quick that there was some tension. There was a little bit of tension, and I thought, maybe it was a bad idea. But I'm like, you know what? Maybe it's my rebellious nature. Maybe it's like I don't like to be told what to do. But I'm like, I'm going, and if I get beat up, I get beat up. And I got on the floor to dance, and next thing you know, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, boom. Man, I was invited in with the group, and there'd be 8 or 9 of us doing certain dances that was part of their culture. I would learn them. I was dancing with them, and it was great. Then I got some of them to come on Friday and Saturday nights, and we would all be dancing, and we would do a whole little, choreographed, dance on the floor and take over the whole floor. I was dancing African-American females. I got along with them really well. They liked dancing with me, and it's like everything, there was no issue. Again, there was no issue. And I got invited to go to house parties with all African Americans. I'd be the only white kid there. And no one ever tried to fight me. I was never called any names, nothing. I got along with them great. And that was the next time where I really kind of I was the white kid standing out, but no controversy. Now, again, when I met them, I always tried, if they told stories, they would tell stories sometimes when you hang out with them about something happened or someone called them the N-word. And to be honest with you, it never really registered in my mind. I just I would kind of look at them that really happens? Because I've never been around it. I never really witnessed it. I never really saw racism. What I saw is that I was usually the odd one out, and I would be accepted by them. And then they would tell stories of how they would be treated in this store or how they would, and I would be like, and I can't say that I thought they were making it up, but I didn't really understand it. I didn't really get it, right? It's just my perspective was off. So next time I encounter something where there's a massive dealing with race, it was when Boys in the Hood came out. The movie's Boys in the Hood. Now, this movie dealt with a lot of things happening in the inner city. Obviously, a movie with lots of obscenity. And I don't know if you remember what was happening, when the movie was opening up in theaters, there was lots of violence in some theaters. And it was almost kind of a message like, if you're white, don't go. And I remember watching the news. I'm like, wait, if I'm white, I'm not supposed to go? I'm like, nope, no, that does not apply to me. So I tried to find the quote unquote, the blackest neighborhood I could find in Omaha, Nebraska. Okay. I know that's where I lived at the time. And I'm like, okay, where is the theater where there's going to be predominantly African Americans? I don't want to go. I could go close to my house and be with all white people, but I don't want that. If the news is telling me I can't go because I'm black, I'm going to go. So guess what? I went to the theater. I sat down. Now, there was a little bit of, it was a little iffy there for a few minutes. I had a couple of people throw things at me. I had some people calling me, cracker. I don't remember some other names, telling me I didn't effing belong, or, hey, white boy, are you lost? And saying some things to me. And it was a little tense. It's a little tense there. And in the theater, they would yell back, talk to the screen, which I love that part of some. I'm not saying all that's common in all African-American communities, but sometimes when I'd go to a movie theater, there was predominantly African-Americans. They seemed to be talking out loud more to the movie than that was common among many of my white friends. And I love that. I love that aspect of it. I'm like, I'm with you there. I want to say things too. So I kind of, something would say they would say something in Boys in the Hood, and I would sometimes shake my head or maybe didn't get it. And there was a little bit of tension. And I was, to be honest, I was a little bit nervous. I did not know how well it was going to go for me when the movie was over, but I made it through it. And I'm getting ready to walk out. And I think there were 3 or 4 African-American, I think they were teenagers, maybe in their 20s. They came up to me and they said, hey, we got a question. And I'm like, okay, yeah. And they're like, why are you here? I'm like, well, why? I want to see the movie. If the movie is about the experience that African-Americans have, I want to see it. I want to understand maybe something that I cannot understand. I want to understand it. And I remember them like, well, that's really cool. And so what did you think? And I'm like, well, there's a lot there I don't understand. I don't understand growing up in a world like that. That just blows my mind. I mean, I would want to get out of that. And, and then they gave me their thoughts, and we talked, and they, all of them shook my hand and said, thank you. And I was like, wow, what did I do? What was so revolutionary about a white person coming to a theater with a bunch of African Americans watching a movie that spoke more to the African American experience than it did to the white experience? Why wouldn't I want to understand their experience too? I don't get it. I can go back to the 1980s, Public Enemy. I think Chuck D is one of the greatest rappers of all time. I think Public Enemy deserves a lot of credit. Now, they were rapping about things I could not wrap my little white mind around at times, but I wanted to understand it. Now, sometimes I didn't get it. And sometimes, I dialed 911 a long time ago. Okay, what's 911 doesn't work in the African-American community. I didn't quite understand some of the things they were talking. Burn Hollywood, burn, blank John Wayne and I can start quoting Public Enemy lyrics. Okay. I've got to do a lot of beep, a lot of blanking things out, but you get but I listened to Public Enemy. Why? Because I wanted to understand. I wanted, what were they trying to say? What was the issues? And I did not always, and I would listen to interviews sometimes with Public Enemy, and I'd be like, what's your problem? What are you complaining about? I didn't get it. I didn't really get. I heard it. I understood it. I knew academically racism existed. I knew that sometimes I would sometimes hear a white person throw out the N-word. Typically, it was older white Americans, and they threw out the N-word when it came to certain types of music. They would call it N music, and I would send me through craziness. I'm like, music is music. It's not white. It's not black. I don't understand why we divide music by race. It's music. It speaks to humans. Now, the lyrics may speak to one experience over another experience, but I would listen to it to understand the experience. That drove me crazy. That's usually where I heard the N-word, is typically older white Americans referring to a certain kind of music, and it made me furious. I did not understand it because I was listening to it. That was one of the things my friends from New York, they exposed me. That was early on in the world of rap. They came here pretty early on. So, Sugar Hill Gang, Run DMC, LL Cool J, there was they kind of exposed me to that. And then I exposed them to, bands like Kiss and Judas Priest and Iron Maiden. And what was bizarre is my African-American friend, he started straightening his hair and wearing leather and listening to metal and he became like a metalhead. And then I was the one listening, I became a Michael Jackson fan. I'd already been a Jackson 5 fan. Michael Jackson, got to go see him in concert. I was listening to Sugar Hill Gang, Run DMC, LL Cool J, Grandmaster Flash. I can move on, Public Enemy. You just go on and on and on. That world, I started listening to that. And it was just this exchange of cultures. And I thought that was cool. He's helping me understand his culture. I'm exposed, because you got to remember, I was growing up in the middle of nowhere, Texas, and we didn't have the internet back then. So this is the way you've got exposed to different cultures. And I thought that was cool. So those were some of my experiences, but my experiences was more positive for me. And I could not quite wrap my mind around the negative for them. Does that make sense? For me, I'm like, hey, we're all cool. They get along with me. I get along with them. We're one big happy family. Let's all have a Coke and a smile. What's the problem? But then you would hear about racism and racism and racism. And I'm like, man, I just don't get it. I don't quite understand it. I don't quite get it. And then witnessing the O.J. Simpson situation, that was a cultural moment in time, right? The whites were like, he's guilty. And many African Americans were like, yay, he wasn't found guilty. And it's like, why are we divided on this by race? I didn't get it. And then when all of the riots, Rodney King after that, and the riots in LA, watching that and seeing sometimes white drivers being drug out of cars and beat because of what the police did to Rodney King. That was insanity. That was crazy, 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 crazy. And again, trying to process that, because what I saw happen to Rodney King was like, whoa. But let me make sure you understand this. From my perspective, I didn't see white on black. I saw cops doing something wrong. I didn't see it from a race perspective. And again, that may be because of my background. Race wasn't really supposed to exist. They're black, I'm white. We're just from different backgrounds. We have different skin color. We're not different. So some saw that whole Rodney King situation in a certain way. So I lived through these and was trying to process it. Now, here's where the big change happened for me. My church in Nebraska wanted to have some big, I don't know, it was a hayride, some kind of big fall kind of activity to quote unquote replace Halloween. It's things churches do that I don't understand why churches do them. And our church was in Bellevue, Nebraska, and where we were going was in Council Bluffs, Iowa, which was right across the river, not very far. And so I go, and with the family that me and my wife go with, they're African-American, we're white. We go with them. And the wives are having a good time. They're hanging out, and me and the African-American guy that I'm with, my friend, we basically like, dude, let's leave. Okay, this is not fun. And the wives are like, sure, you guys go ahead. And I'm like, all right, you ready? So we hop in my car, and I think it was a truck. We hop in my truck and we start driving back. We're going to go back through Council Bluffs because we're out kind of in the country. We go back through Council Bluffs, and then we're going to cross over back to Omaha and then into Bellevue. All right. So it's late. I don't know, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. And we're driving, and I come to a red light. I fully stop. I turn on my blinker, and I take a right on a red. There's no sign saying I can't take a right on a red, nothing like that. All of a sudden, boom, police lights in the back. I don't think anything of it. I'm like, some cop's going to pull me over. Who knows why? I don't care why. Big deal. It's going to be irritating, but I don't think I did anything wrong, so I'm not really worried about it. Okay. So I pull over, and we're just kind of sitting there waiting. And I'm like, what are we waiting for? Like, why? And like I'm about to just get out of the car and go, hey, what's the problem? They don't come up to my side. They come up to the passenger side where my friend, who happens to be African-American, they come to his side. They got a flashlight in his face. Now, someone explain to me why. Like, why are they there? I don't know. And they tap on the window. And he rolls down the window, and they say, what are you doing, boy? What is going on? I've never witnessed anything like this in my life. Now, I don't know if they could tell that he was black sitting back in their car. I don't know if they could tell, but it made no sense to me, right? And to say, what are you doing, boy? What are you doing, boy? Like, that's how you approach someone sitting in a car? What are you doing, boy? And so I look over, I'm like, what's the problem? I'm the driver. And they told me to be quiet. What? So they ask for now listen to this. They ask for his driver's license. He's not driving the car. Right? And so I'm like, whoa. I'm the driver. And they tell me to be quiet. Well, he starts to get upset, and I'm like, and so I like, something's going on. So I kind of reach over and I'm like, just calm down. Because I didn't know what was going on, but there was just a tension in the air that I had never experienced in my life. So they give him the license, and they say, where have you guys been? And I'm like, we were with a church thing. I'm like, what were you doing? All right. But they're not asking me the questions I'm trying to answer. They're asking him. And I'm like, wait, what is going on? Finally, I start kind of getting upset. I'm like, look, what's the issue? And they said, the issue is you took a right on red. No, you ran a red light. And I'm like, I did not run a red light. I turned a right on red after coming to a full stop. And they're like, no, you didn't. And I'm like, oh boy, what is going on? So I thought for a second we're about to ask my friend to get out of the car, which would have made no sense. But I started getting upset, and they said, sir, calm down. We're just going to give you a warning, right? And I'm like, a warning for what, right? And they said, well, you need to make sure you come to a full stop on a red light. And I'm like, okay. And they finally hand the license back to my African-American friend, and then they say, boy, make sure you don't cause any trouble. Boy, make sure. What are you talking about? When I drove off, I was literally shaking. I was so angry. Like, I can't even express to you. Like, I witnessed with my own eyes the harassment of someone. And you can't tell me, look, if they were looking for someone, like they'd given a message that there were two suspects, and we matched the profile or the description of two suspects. If they walk up, ask us for our information, and then say, look, We had to check because you two guys fit the match of some suspects we're looking for. Look, I can understand that to some level. But the way they did it, you cannot tell me race was not the factor. And I don't care. I'm going to get 20 emails going, you don't know that. Look, I don't care. There was no reason to do that. It was purely picking on him, and they were trying to provoke a reaction. It's like they were trying to provoke because I was raising my voice, and they weren't doing anything to provoke me. They were just telling me to be quiet and calm down. They were going after him. It was straight up racism. And from that moment, I was like, wait a minute. African Americans, I can't say how frequently, I cannot say how often, but they clearly experience something. I have never experienced anything like that. The closest I've ever come is here in West Texas. We had a DPS officer who would, on Friday nights, Saturday nights, he would come up, usually on cars, he would come up and get as close to your bumper as possible, slam on the brights. You wouldn't be able to tell that it was a cop behind you. You just know someone got on your bumper and put the brights on you, and then you would speed up, and then he would come get you for speeding. He was a complete jerk, and he basically did this to teenagers who were out on Friday and Saturday nights. All right? That was just being a jerk. He wasn't trying to harass anyone because of race. Now, there's some cops who are just out harassing people no matter who they are, but that was the first time I ever truly experienced it. And when I experienced that, I was like, wow. And I tried to process it. I really tried to process it. I'm like, that's an experience I don't understand. I don't understand. Then I become a pastor. And when I had encountered in a couple of churches where, the church, the pastor, was opposed. He argued for biblical reasons, interracial marriage. Now, the weird thing is it was okay for quote unquote racial marriage for all other races except for white and black. That was wrong. And I was like, absolutely. So when I became a pastor, I don't know if it was the first week, second week, I basically said, look, if you're racist and you are against people, if you have any racist tendencies, if you have any racist ideology, you need to get up and get out. I'm not tolerating it for 2 seconds. Get out, right? Because I knew I was coming back to an area where I didn't really experience a lot of racism, but I just wanted to ensure that was not going to be in my church. Racism was not going to be in my church under any way, shape, or form. I was going to get rid of it. And ultimately, an African American male and his wife, who is white, they came to our church. And I'll never forget, he asked me, is it okay that we come to your church even though I'm black and she's white? And I'm like, why would you even ask that question? Then I found out that he had encountered in a number of churches that they were not welcomed. And I almost gave up Christianity right then and there. Now, again, when I say I gave up Christianity, not biblical Jesus salvation, but Christianity of churches that don't reflect biblical Christianity. I could not believe that. And so after getting to know him, going out to eat with him a number of times, he told me about a lot of his experiences. And again, I'm like, I can't comprehend it. I cannot comprehend what he has experienced in his life. I can't get it. I can't wrap my mind around it. Being called the N-word and being treated a certain way. I'm like, how does that happen? Like, again, for me, from the white world perspective, that's stuff in movies. That's stuff that people are exaggerating for political reasons. We sometimes don't get it. So I say all of that to say this. One of the reasons I have not dealt with the George Floyd story or the Ahmaud Arbery story is because who am I to speak to it? What these men experienced, and not just them, countless other men who are African American, and I'm assuming African American women too, but typically we hear about African American men. Typically, what we hear is that they're the ones who get harassed when they get pulled over. They're the ones these things happen. They get stopped. They get questioned. And when you hear these stories, many times white Americans, their first thought is they probably were out doing something questionable. They were probably doing something wrong. And in some cases, maybe they were, and maybe it was perfectly okay to stop them. Now, there's one thing to perfectly okay to stop them, but if you treat them differently, if you harass, if you're provoking, or if you're using force that you would not use on someone else, then it crosses the line. It crosses because you're not treating white people that way. That becomes an issue. But again, I want to stress this. For many not all white people, but for many white people, we don't get it. We don't understand it. It's a foreign concept to us. It's something we can't wrap our mind around. We think that can't be happening. And our culture, we pretty much like, no, racism, we're not living in the 1950s. We're not living in the 1960s. And yes, there are many things that have improved. Obviously, we elected a black president, which was an amazing thing. And I'm glad I got to see it happen. And I made sure my daughters watched, watched the whole process and watched him being brought into office and being sworn into office, because when Barack Obama did that was an amazing accomplishment in the history of our country. So I want to celebrate every advance we have, but there are still things happening that Americans just don't get. The white American we don't understand. And sometimes I have to say this to all African Americans. I apologize on behalf of all whites, because sometimes our perspective it's hard for us we hear the story. And again, I've heard the stories, but they're almost like, they're like academic knowledge. When you witness it, it's like, whoa. It's like a slap in the face. It's all of a sudden the academic information just became very real. And then we have to try to process it. And sometimes what whites do is they immediately run to, we're going to argue statistically. Well, statistically, more white people get pulled over or more white people get shot and killed. And we start arguing all of these statistics. All of those statistics overlook the experience that many African Americans have that statistics don't capture. Statistics don't tell the whole story. So we don't actually get it. We don't actually understand. And I think sometimes our words demonstrate, more of a political ideology or an ignorant ideology, that we're speaking of ignorance. I can't speak to the black experience. I can't speak to it. I don't know it. I don't understand it. That's why I haven't spoken about these stories, because what can I say? What can a white guy here in the middle of nowhere, Texas, say that's even relevant to this subject? I can't. Now, I can sit here and do what everyone else does and go, well, okay, this is how many African Americans have been killed by police. This is how many white people have been killed. And I could sit here and get into all of those arguments. But all of those arguments is missing the point. All of those arguments is missing the point. Listen, whenever anyone dies, I don't care white, black, Hispanic, Asian, I don't care. They die. That's a human being dying who is created in the image of God. And that should bother us. So the first thing we need to do is grieve and weep that another human being created in the image of God died. That should be our first response. I don't care what color. All right? And we take them case by case. The first thing we don't want to do is just start trying to excuse it and go, well, they wouldn't have been doing this. They wouldn't have been doing that. They wouldn't have gotten shot. That's when Christians start acting like we're politicians and that we're in the world. The first thing we want to do is grieve. A human being died. That's horrible. A human being was sent into eternity. That was wrong. That's horrible. We hate that. We grieve for that. We don't like that. We do, as Christians, we always talk about being pro-life. Well, then grieve when any life is taken. Even sometimes when it's necessary, even sometimes in a war that may be justified, we still grieve that people die. Even if we know the Bible does call that if someone kills someone, they kill someone created in the image of God, then they are to be killed. Their blood is to be spilt. Now, I'm not a big fan of the modern day capital punishment system because I think there's an inequality in it. If you're rich, you're probably not going to get put in the electric chair. If you're poor, you have a far greater chance. And I think that it's got to be somehow some equality in it. But even if you believe someone has committed a horrible crime and they're going to be punished, the punishment may be just, but we should still grieve that life committed those crimes and that life is now being sent into eternity. That's the pro-life should be. We don't want any life to die. And for any reason, we think all life is sacred. There's sanctity to human life because it was created in the image of God. And so many times when these stories happen, you see Christians wanting to argue like, well, I don't think he was really out on a jog. I think he was going to rob that house that was under construction. So, that's what happens. Whoa. Slow down. First, a human being was killed. Okay, that's the first thing we should be concerned with. I think Christians sometimes get caught up in the cultural arguing, and we've got to look at it. A human being was killed. And Christians, we're the ones, look, the world, they can argue all day about people being killed, but they believe that we're just evolved animals. So I don't know what inherently makes killing one thing wrong. There's no transcendent law against it. It's just survival of the fittest, and the strongest survive, and they kill off the weak. Like, that's evolution. But from a Christian perspective, we're like, no. All life is sacred. All life has value. All human beings are created in the image of God. When someone kills someone, they're killing something created in the image of God. It's an attack upon the creation of God. And we should grieve for it. Now, we want due process to happen. We want the legal system to run its course, and we want justice to be done. If a killing was done incorrectly, and listen, this is very important. Christians should understand this. Sometimes a cop can kill someone, and maybe they somehow are able to justify it legally. They're somehow able to justify it legally. But let's make sure we get this. Legality does not equal morality. It's legal to abort a baby. Morally, we believe that is sinful and wrong and that it's murder. The legal system says it's okay. Just because something is legal does not make it something moral. Sometimes Christians forget that. Like one time we'll say, hey, I don't care what the law says, it's immoral. And then on another case, well, that cop killed that individual. Well, they said it was legal. They were acquitted, so we don't need to worry about it. Was it moral? Was it right? Was it just? Now, if it passes a legal definition, then we may not call for the person to be thrown in prison, but we can still say morally, I don't believe it was right. In George Floyd's situation, there were, three cops standing around. The guy was brought down to the ground, and you got a white officer with his knee on his throat. Now, I don't care what he had done. By the time, once he's on the ground and in cuffs, and there's 4 cops, I don't think you need to keep the knee on the throat, right? No matter what else can be said. But see, it'll turn into everyone making arguments and making excuses and going, well, what about this? And he did this. That's not the point. The point is they reached a point where he was subdued, whether it was right to subdue him or wrong to subdue him. We don't need even to get into that. There came a point that he was clearly no longer a threat. So why continue to do that? Now, was it racism? I don't know. Maybe the cop was racist. Maybe the cop wasn't racist. But I can tell you this, it wasn't just and it wasn't right and it wasn't moral. It may have been completely legal for them to restrain him and take him down, but at some point it's not, it doesn't even reach legality. He was no longer posed a threat. People could have backed away and stood there and said, lay there until we figure out what's going on. But no. And again, I don't even like trying to break the cases down because I'll get 900 emails. And we're going, well, you got to see this footage. You got to see this footage. You're missing the point. The point is, time and time again, headline after headline, story after story, headline after headline, story after story, an African-American male finds themselves in some kind of crazy situation, dealing in most cases with a white cop, and they either get shot, killed, harassed, beaten, and something happens. Now, I understand there are things that happen with people of all races, but right now we're dealing with the recent accounts of happening to African American males, and that is where we have to say, what is going on? So here's what I want you to just try to process. 1, As a white person, if you're listening to me and you're white, try to at least acknowledge that you may not understand the experience of a black American male. You may not understand it, or a black American woman. You may not be able to understand it and realize that. And because you can't understand the experience, when something happens, you just see it as that's an anomaly. That's just a one-time thing. And then the next time it happens, well, it's just an anomaly, or maybe they deserved it. We just try to excuse it away because it's hard for us to process because we don't live it. We don't see it. We don't experience it. I can't relate. I know this, that if you have friends who are African American, talk to them, ask them to share their experience, ask them to share their stories. And sometimes you're like, wow, I didn't really know that kind of stuff happened. I just think that sometimes we look at these stories and we just want to come up with, we want to explain it away. We want to excuse it. And we can't do that. So the first thing I just want you to see, white Americans, we don't get it. And then secondly, from a Christian perspective, we need to look at it first that when life is ended, no matter what the race is, we grieve. We don't just come up with excuses. It's like when they had those photographs, I think it was a father and a daughter, father and a son who were trying to cross over from Mexico into the United States illegally, and I guess they drowned. And then you even had Christians. Well, that's what they get. That's what they get. That's what they deserve. What are you talking about? They're human beings who died. Look, before you get into the legal argument, can we not grieve that a human being died? Can it not bother us? Can we not weep? Can we not cry out to God to have mercy? Can we not? But that's the political hijacking of the stinking church, where we hop on social media and we sound like we're Republicans or we're a conservative talk show host, and it's like, where is the Christian words? The Christian words, I weep, I grieve with you. The Christian words are, someone died, someone created in the image of God. The Christian perspective is we want justice. We want people to be treated correctly. We want to treat others as we want to be treated. Isn't that like pretty basic Christianity? We want to love our neighbor. We want to love even our enemy. Where is love towards people? Look, I don't understand African American experience, but I'm to love people of all races. I'm to love my neighbor, no matter who they are. I want to demonstrate love. And a part of love is trying to understand. I don't get the perspective because I haven't lived it. I haven't experienced it. I don't know what it's like. I don't know what it's like. I can't imagine. I mean, I've heard stories from African Americans, people saying the N-word to them. I can't even believe that even happens. Now, if it happened in front of me, I'd probably lose my mind and probably end up in jail, which wouldn't be godly because I'd be so upset that a white person would say something like that. I have seen some photographs from social media of things said in regards to the death of George Floyd. And I literally almost broke down in tears. And what some people say, well, that's just social media. That's just people trolling. I don't care. It's racist garbage. It's bigotry and it's wrong. And again, I wouldn't care if it was a white person who died and African Americans were saying something that way. It doesn't matter the race. We're human beings. Christians need a biblical perspective on this kind of thing. They need a biblical perspective. And right now, tensions are mounting. Okay? And we're already such a divided country. We're divided politically. We're divided ideologically. Christians, we need to be salt. We need to be light. Don't get caught up in those divisions. Christianity, when I see someone of a different race, I don't see color. I see someone created in the image of God. And I want them to repent and believe in Christ. And if they believe in Christ, they're my brother, they're my sister. Doesn't matter if they're black, white, Hispanic, Asian, doesn't matter. Race doesn't matter. We're all one in Christ. And listen, if they're not a Christian, they may not be my brother or sister in the Lord, but they are a human being created by my Creator. They're created by God and they bear His image. I don't see the race. I see the image of God. I don't see race. I see the image of God. That's what we're supposed to do as Christians. And the fact that stinking racism came into the church, supported by the church, ticks me off. And it should not be tolerated for 1 second. Sometimes I think we're quicker to punish someone for a sexual sin than we are for racism in the church. Racism has no place in the name of Christianity. But see, if you try to fight this stuff, then they're like, oh no, you're woke and you want social justice and you're trying to bring all of this nonsense into the church. I'm trying to apply biblical truth to the issue of race. I don't believe that they're just an evolved animal. I don't believe that they're just going to die and go back to dust and their life has no intrinsic sacred value. I believe all human beings are created by God. Therefore, their life has intrinsic value. There's a sanctity to that life. There's a sacredness to that life. And I want them to repent and come to faith in Jesus Christ so that they can spend an eternity with God. There's neither Jew nor Gentile in Christ. There's not male or female in Christ. We see each other as redeemed individuals. I think number one, our perspective, sometimes we don't get it because of our race and our background. And I think sometimes Christians sound more like the culture than they do Christians. They sound like that they work for Fox News or they listen to Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, and it's like that's not Christianity, people. Conservatism, Republican conservative movement is not a Christian one. And we try to merge the two together, we get some hybrid that's not truly Christian, and we don't want to deviate at all. This whole story makes me sick. And again, I'm going to get 900 emails trying to make some justification. They're going to try to make some justification for one of those stories that I mentioned. I'm not here to argue all the details. You're missing the point. Over and over, African Americans end up as a headline of something happening to them in regards to the police or some other apparent racist motivated act. And then if you have African-American athletes who don't want to stand for the national anthem, then everyone loses their garbage and everyone gets upset. Everybody gets mad. Well, you know what? If they don't feel like they can be heard, maybe that's the way to do it. Now, you can have that argument all day, but again, I don't understand their experience. I see things through my little white world lens and I don't get it. I don't understand what they experience. If a cop pulls me over, I'm not worried. I mean, me and my daughter was talking about this the other night, just when sometimes you hear some of you saw, I think was it Minnesota? The gentleman who was going to reach to get his license and he got shot in the car with his wife. And the daughter in the back seat, horrible, horrible, horrible situation, and other things that's happened to African Americans when they're pulled over by the police. Me and her were talking about it like I've never given it thought. A cop pulls me over, I just start reaching into the glove department. I don't wait. I don't leave my hands on the steering wheel. I don't even worry about it. Now, sometimes I'm thinking, man, that's probably dumb. I could end up getting shot, because again, I don't always see this from a racial issue. I don't always see it from a race perspective. So maybe I'm putting myself at risk. I don't know. I don't think about it. Now, I haven't been pulled over in a long time, but every time I've ever been pulled over, I just start, before they even get out of the car, I'm over there reaching. When they come walking up to the window, I'm in the glove department usually because I can't find my registration or proof of insurance or my driver's license. I can't find anything. And I'm over there looking for it. I'm not worried about if I pull out of this glove department, they're going to put 3 bullets in me. I don't think they're going to drag me out of the car. I've never felt that way. Now I've had some cops that were jerks who pulled me over. I have, but see, sometimes cops are jerks. See, sometimes it's not a race issue. Sometimes it's just cops being jerks, and that's garbage. And cops they're supposed to be there to protect and serve us. They're not there to be jerks over us. I hate when cops are jerks. I hate it. I hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it when cops are jerks. I understand they deal with a lot of garbage, but their job is to protect and serve the public. And sometimes I think they forget that. They think that they just have the power over the public. But that's not a race issue. So sometimes when things happen, racism is not involved. And I think from an African American perspective, that may be hard to see. It may be hard for them to see, that's just a cop that went too far and is a jerk and not see it as a racial issue. I may be blind and going, maybe it's not a race issue when it is a race issue. I think that, again, perspective. I can't understand. Sometimes we have to realize our perspective is limited and we've got to know our limitations. We got to know when we can't process it correctly and try to step back. But it's a horrible, horrible thing that's happening. And as a result of what's happening, well, I'm going to stop. I've talked for an hour. I had news clips. I had a whole different direction I wanted to go with this, but I thought I would just share my thoughts. I share my experience. So I'll summarize this way. Number one, I can't understand African-American experience because I'm white and I haven't lived it. I can hear it. I can know it. I can understand it academically, but that's far different than living it. When I watched it happen to my friend in Council Bluffs, Iowa, by clearly cops trying to provoke him, clearly using terms that just sounded, they didn't use the N-word, but that boy to me just sounded straight up racist. I couldn't believe it. And I was like, it happens. I never would have thought it happened. I heard about it, but I never thought that it actually occurred because I couldn't understand it because I was raised, race is irrelevant, so don't see race. That's not, my mom was big on this. Don't say that black kid. No, get his name. He's not the black kid. He has a name. Okay, my friends. Larry. Okay, Larry. He wasn't the black kid at school. His name was Larry. His race is irrelevant. I do the same thing. Yeah, I taught my girls the same thing. Hey, no. That's not the little black girl that will get her name. She has a name. Her name's not black. Okay, that's not her name. Okay. Now I understand that sometimes you're drawing a distinction between, you see the two people over there. Okay, I don't know their names. Okay, that's the black one. Okay, I don't think there's something inherently wrong with that. But we want to refer to people by their name and not simply their race. Okay. Or now if you don't know two and the difference between the two is one is white and one is black. No, the white person. Okay. Yeah. You can say something in a way that's not racist. I remember, I'll give you an example sometimes how crazy things can get going the other extreme. I was in tech school. This is the craziest thing ever. I was in tech school and we had been out. I don't know if we did some military exercise. I don't know, but I was covered in dirt and everything. And so I'm standing there talking to all these people in the hallway and I'm like, man, this white boy is going to take a shower. And I get called to the commander's office there at tech school, and someone had accused me of racism because I referred to myself as the white boy. And so he said, what do I have to say? And I'm like, well, sir, if you look at me, I'm white. Okay. I'm white. So I just, and I don't know if I can't refer to myself as the white boy. And if that's racism, I don't know. I wasn't referring to anyone else by their race. I was referring to myself. And I think I can refer to myself as the white boy because I was white. Okay. So sometimes it goes too far the other way. Okay. And I was like, what in the world is happening? But you know what? I don't know who made the accusation against me. I don't know if it was someone who was black. I don't know. But you know what? I didn't turn it. I didn't feel like, oh, this is a race issue. Oh, blacks after whites and whites after blacks. I don't care about that. Like, it's people. It's people. I wish we could get back to people, human beings and Christians created in the image of God. We offer something the world doesn't have. The world, how can the world handle this subject? How can the world fix it? They can't fix it politically. You can get online and argue all day. Well, nope, this many white people are killed by cops. In fact, white people are more likely to be killed by a police officer than black. So if a black person is killed, it doesn't matter. Whoa. That's not the way Christians are supposed to handle it. That's the world. And we listen, guys, you're all confused. Okay. We have something for you. It's called all human beings have a dignity and a sanctity. They're not just an evolved animal where we try to impose some system of morality that's only temporary until we decide to change our mind. We believe that God calls us to love all people, regardless of race, Jew and Gentile. Doesn't matter. We love all. We're supposed to love even our enemies. We're supposed to treat others as the way we want to be treated. We're supposed to think of others even before ourselves. Seeing human beings as a creation of God whose life has dignity and sanctity, that's the answer. All the battles that Christians get into about statistics and racism and who did what, and you're just falling into the world's trap. And therefore, once we fall into their trap, we can't get them out of darkness. I wish racism did not exist. Racism is a product of man's depravity. It's a sin issue. It's not a political issue. It's not a Republican issue. It's not a Democratic issue. It's a sin issue. All right, I'll stop right there. I don't know if I accomplished anything today, but I just wanted to share this. I've been weighed down by it. I got some emails from people asking me how come I haven't addressed it, and I haven't addressed it because I just don't feel adequate. And I wanted to offer a perspective that's different than everyone else's, and I doubt that I did that. I'm going to get emails. Well, people are going to try to pull me right into the old arguments. Well, did you see this part of the footage? Did you know that this person did this, and you know this, and you know about that? You're missing the whole point. Human beings died. Maybe you can make a legal justification. Maybe you can make a legal justification for one. Maybe you could. Maybe you couldn't. But even if you can find a way to prove it legally, does that mean it was morally? Does that mean it was right? Does that mean it was just? And are you telling me there's not an issue where time and time again, headline after headline, story after story, we read the same thing? Another African-American male dead. Now, I know some saying they're being murdered. We can get into all what's the exact way to phrase it, but we want it to, and I want it to stop for everyone. I don't want the police to go overstep their boundaries for anyone of any race. I want the police to protect and serve and not act like they're, that we're the enemy and they're against us. And I don't want us to treat the police like they're the enemy. Because I want to treat them like I want to be treated. I want to show love to them. Even if I perceive them to be the enemy, from the Christian perspective, I'm supposed to love even my enemy. The Christian answer is to love them. And right now, we've got violence, and I think 9 buildings were burnt down in Minnesota. And the National Guard's being called in. So we're going to have more destruction, more injuries, and more death. There's no answer in the world. There's no answer in politics. We need a Christian perspective. You can email me your thoughts at newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. That's newsif@yahoo.com. God bless.